like to invite Dr. Tigist, who's a Senior Conflict Prevention and Recovery Advisor to UNDP, and her panelists to take the stage, please. Over to you, Dr. Tigist.
Good afternoon, or is it good morning? What time is it? It's almost noon. I hope you enjoy your coffee. Well, I'm very happy to moderate this session. My name is Tigist Yeshuas. I was actually a former IPSS staff. I was assistant professor in IPSS. I left, but it's my home. So happy to see again so many familiar faces and colleagues. Currently, I'm a consultant. I work for UNDP as a senior conflict prevention and recovery advisor. Actually, I was based in Eswatini. I just came back. So our session now, we're going to discuss, the first session is on Chinese experience and African development learning. And then we have very interesting panelists this morning. Regards to the formats or the objective of this session, we'd like to achieve first, I think, to have sort of in-depth discussion on the development of Chinese in Africa, use, and also China and Africa cooperation, in particular on use, since our team is use. And the other objective that we'd like to achieve in this session is the experience sharing and learning in China and Africa, and also the multidimensional relations with people-to-people relations, business to business, and of course, government to government. And finally, to achieve sort of, what achievements have made, what lessons have we gained in regards to China and Africa cooperation. So, with further ado, I would like to invite our speakers, our panelists. Mr. Wang Zion, he's a Deputy Director of General Office in China, is a Chinese NGO, or it's an NGO network of international exchange. And I think he'll do his remarks via video. He's a she. Sorry, apologies with the names. She's a she. She will be she'll be speaking via video, right? Or yeah. And the second is Mr. Tadele Alemne. He's from Deborah Marcus University. He's a lecturer and a PhD candidate at Bamint University. Third, we have two young representatives from the Africa Union Commission, Ms. Sanzizle and Ms. Atlika. They are from the Youth for Peace Africa program of the Africa Union. They will also reflect on, they will mainly focus on the youth from the Africa Union department. And finally, Mr. Hang Yampeng, apologies again if I mispronounce it. He is the investment manager for business and investment department at CCEC Ethiopia Construction. All of you are welcome to the stage. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Yeah. So our first speaker is the video ready. The support team.
Distinguished Minister Ogoji Tesfaye, Ambassador Tesfaye Yoma, Distinguished Ambassador Zhao Zhiyuan, dear friends from China and Africa, good morning. I'm Wang Zhiyuan from China NGO Network for International Exchanges, CNIE, the largest NGO umbrella organization in China in the field of international exchanges. We're supervised by the International Department of the CPC Central Committee. It's my great honor to attend today's forum. I'd like to thank the organizer for hosting the forum and inviting CNIE to participate. The 20th National Congress of the CPC was concluded just a couple of days ago. The Congress summarized the historical achievements of the CPC in the past decade in 16 aspects, including achieving moderate prosperity, eliminating absolute poverty, comprehensively deepening reform, and pursued a more proactive strategy of opening up, etc. These achievements are realized because of the strong leadership of the CPC with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, and because of the arduous efforts of the Chinese people of all ethnic groups. The original aspiration of the CPC from the very beginning of its founding has never changed, which is striving for the happiness of the Chinese people, and the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. The CPC has always put the people first, put the interests of the people above all else, and keep in mind the most pressing and most immediate issues that concern the people most. The CPC has proved itself in the saving the lives of its people in the battle against COVID-19 and in eliminating absolute poverty in China. For China's experience of poverty reduction, we stand ready to share them with all our friends from every part of the world, especially our friends from Africa. In his report to the 20th National Congress of the CPC, General Secretary Xi Jinping highlighted our achievements and follow-up measures in the field of environmental protection and green development. Going forward, we will continue to promote green development, work toward the goals of reaching peak carbon emissions and carbon neutrality. This is also in line with the Global Development Initiative and in line with the UN 2030 SDGs. We learned that Ethiopia also attaches great importance to green development. Your Prime Minister proposed a green heritage plan to build a green and climate resilient economy. In this regard, I think our two countries have great potential for cooperation. Actually, for China and Africa and for China and Ethiopia, there is a long list of areas of cooperation. Last year's FOCAC meeting issued the China-Africa Cooperation Vision 2035. Under the first 3-year plan of the vision, China will work closely with African countries to implement the 9 programs. This has charted direction for our cooperation and highlighted the key areas of cooperation. CNIE is an NGO umbrella organization in China. Our mission is to facilitate Chinese NGOs to carry out international cooperation with foreign NGOs, think tanks, and media. Africa is always the priority on our agenda. We are committed to building platforms for China and Africa cooperation. We have hosted 6 sessions of China-Africa People's Forum. In November 2021, the 6th session of the forum was held in Beijing. President Xi Jinping sent congratulatory message to the forum. The forum unveiled the China-Africa People-to-People Cooperation Partnership Plan. And in August this year, we hosted the conference of the International Civil Society on Global Development Initiative and set up a poverty reduction network of the International Civil Society. CNIE is also a founding organization of China-Africa Poverty Reduction Network. In the past, we have carried out a series of livelihood programs in Ethiopia and other African countries, Silk Road Community Building Initiative programs, providing medical and daily supplies to African children, drilling wells in African villages, building schools for local children, to name a few. For our member organizations such as China Foundation for Rural Development and Amity Foundation, they already set up branch offices in Ethiopia. Young people are the future of our cooperation. Going forward, we will keep our efforts in strengthening cooperation with African partners, especially with young people from Africa and Ethiopia. I believe the friendship between China and Africa knows no bounds. The prospects of our cooperation are promising and bright in the new era. Let's all join hands in building a high-level China-Africa community with a shared future. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. Let's give her another round of applause, please. Thank you so much for sharing China's Africa's experience in so many areas of cooperation, from COVID to green legacy and different supports. We really appreciate. Thank you so much. We'll come back later on and question and answer session. Now I'll pass the floor to our second speaker, Mr. Tadel. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Okay, welcome back to this session. My topic of discussion is that of is Ethiopia-China economic relationship a classic win-win situation? Having said this, these are the outline of the presentation, introduction. Ethiopia-China relationship, Ethiopia's trade with China, China's development assistance and FDI, and finally there will be conclusion part. As an introduction, Africa is a land of hope. So China and Africa will always be a community of shared future from the perspective of economic, social, and cultural relationships. So that China and African countries supported each other and expanded mutual economic and political trust in the process of building a shared future. In pursuing economic development and national rejuvenation, both sides have been helping each other and increasing the scope of cooperation. On major international and regional issues, they have coordinated their positions and jointly safeguarded international equality and justice. So China and Africa have been economic and trade cooperation expanding rapidly in scale and magnitude. For instance, the Chinese foreign assistance that goes to Africa takes the around 45% share compared to other regions, and followed by Asia, which took around 36% of Chinese foreign assistance towards it. And the other is that of Chinese direct investment in Africa. Chinese direct investment is showing tremendous growth since 2003 to the 2020. Initially, during the 2003, very few foreign direct investment forwarded to Africa, but now it goes to around 43 billion US dollar that is investing in Africa, showing the Chinese direct investment to Africa is increasing significantly. And also China-Africa trade volume. Africa becomes Chinese trade partnership rather than being the aid recipient. So the Chinese economic relationship is becoming significantly increased. But there are controversial arguments about China-Africa relationship. The first obsolete argument that came by the Westerns is that of China's interest in Africa is primarily driven by hunger for resources. And the other contemporary argument that makes prominent is that Africa-China relationship is a strategic partner and win-win situation. My focus of discussion is focusing on Ethiopia's context, how these two arguments is ratified or refuted or agreed, depending on the context of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a significant departure on China-Africa relationship, which formerly thought that China's interest in Africa was primarily motivated by a need for resource where the country is resourceful. Just Ethiopia is resourceful, but China's investment and economic integration to Ethiopia is significantly increasing, which disproves the Chinese interest in Africa is primarily driven by hunger of resources. Ethiopia's export is focused on agriculture products, which take around 90%, more than 90% of export earnings. Agriculture sector share around 40% of its GDP. So Ethiopia's main income is mainly driven from agriculture. Perhaps Ethiopia and China economic relationship is significant, but this significant growth has becoming showing around 11 to 8% since 2003 to 2018 compared to the previous years. The period of high growth rate of Ethiopia was also marked by an intensification of Ethio-China economic relations. So the intensification of Ethiopian economic growth is driven by the economic relationship between Ethiopia and China that falsifies Chinese interest in Africa is resource manipulation, which doesn't going to work. Ethiopia's imports from China increased rapidly from 2002 onwards. And also export to China is more recent phenomena. Prior to 2005, China was relatively an important export destination for Ethiopia, with a share of around 2.4%, which rose to around 11% in 2012. Despite being an agricultural exporter, Ethiopia has attracted significant volume of Chinese official financial flows and foreign direct investment. The next is Ethio-China relations. China's official financial flows are largely directed to build critical infrastructure in Ethiopia, including the manufacturing sector. Although Ethiopia is landlocked, it is strategically located in the Horn of Africa and is a lucrative market for Chinese products. Ethiopia's export to China have rapidly, but it suffers a huge increase in trade deficits. For obvious reason, when two countries are trading each other, particularly if the volume of their economy is different, there is trade-off. But what makes them is that having trade relationship with these countries has to be based on the comparative advantage that the comparative advantage seems to suggest that the country is following. So China's investment, particularly in the telecommunication energy, has also a significant increment. Ethio-China relations have grown strongly in the areas of road construction, supply of manufactured goods, telecommunication, electric power installation, and the like. Given Ethiopia's strategic importance, Chinese investment and aid directed to Ethiopia are also aimed to providing a model for other African countries. The main beneficiaries are located consumers and commercial traders who bring manufactured consumer goods from China for sale in Ethiopia, as well as entrepreneurs engaged in establishing small-scale factories and service centers by buying machineries from China. For obvious reason, during these events, there are potential losers. China's contribution to Ethiopia's economic development is quite significant in infrastructure, information, and hydroelectric projects. And also, Chinese government has allocated grants to support construction of low-cost housing, rural school construction, the rehabilitation of roads and bridges, the vocational, agricultural, and management training institutes. However, most of these tied to Chinese companies and important Chinese materials. Ethiopia has also gained from China's zero-tariff policy about 444 types of commodities, and its exports to China have grown tremendously after 2005. Chinese role in sectors such as telecommunication, transport, and electricity seems a kind of quasi-investment, because when there are large-scale projects, particularly less developed countries are impossible without finance. So Chinese companies are involved in nearly all power generation projects and power transmission and government universal access programs, which cost us around 1.7 billion, 315 million, and also 23 million, respectively, for the aforementioned project types. Chinese firms also dominate Ethiopia's road construction and telecommunications sector. From China point of view, Ethiopia's main attraction lies in its strategic importance and market potential, even though it lacks natural resources. The motive for China's increased activities in Ethiopia lies also in its diplomatic usefulness. Ethiopia is one of the most important countries in China, as well as European cooperation with Africa, due to the level of needs, perceived development orientation of the government, and also good track record in implementing assistance. But Chinese and European policies towards Ethiopia differ greatly. The European Union mainly engages in Ethiopia as an aid recipient, whereas China has developed a comprehensive partnership with Ethiopia. China's largest impact on development opportunities in Africa does not stem from pure aid, but from the official flows, trade, and investment. However, the main problem in Ethio-China relations lies with large and growing imbalance in trade. Competition from Chinese import, particularly plastic and textile manufacturing. Moreover, some Chinese projects financed through tied aid, which might create over-dependency because once Chinese equipment become operational, it will be difficult, if not possible, to use spare parts from other sources. The next topic is Ethiopian trade with China. The geographical composition of Ethiopia's export also underwent significant changes. Ethiopia export to China from 2000 to 2018 grew at a very rapid rate. It increased about 6-fold. China becomes the country's top export destination. The share of its previous top export market was Germany, Japan, Djibouti, Italy, and now they are becoming declining trend. Around 70% of total export of sesame to the global market destination is China for Ethiopia. Leather is another export to China, which takes around 41% of its export that Ethiopia is exporting. This is due to the zero tariff opportunity of agricultural exports to China given to less developed countries. In 2020, Ethiopia imported around 2.75 billion from China, while during the last 25 years, the import of Ethiopia from China have increased at an annualized rate of around 18%. And also Ethiopia exports around 122 million US dollars to China. And the main products are oilseed, groundnuts, including coffee. Coffee is another new destination, export destination for Ethiopia. During the last 25 years, export of China to Ethiopia have increased at an annual rate of 23%, around 24%. The other is foreign direct development assistance and FDI. Many studies have de-emphasized the role of Chinese FDI in Africa, that Chinese investment in Africa is characterized by large-scale investment in oil, gas, and mining sectors by the state-owned enterprises. It is blamed for Chinese investment focused on state-owned enterprises. However, recently studies have challenged this view. Despite being an agricultural exporter, Ethiopia has attracted significant volumes of Chinese FDI, contrary to the popular wisdom that focuses on state-owned enterprises are engaged in less developed countries. But around 69% of Chinese enterprises in Ethiopia are privately owned. 15% are private joint ventures with an Ethiopian partner, and only 13% of Chinese state-owned investment is engaged in Ethiopia, where are typically engaged in the construction and transport business. Chinese FDI inflow to Ethiopia averaged around 88.5 million US dollar, and from the period of 1997 to 2008, its growth is very tremendous. One of the major criticisms of Chinese investment is that local job creation is limited due to employment of Chinese professionals. and also other critics are there in connection with Chinese investment. To conclude the above discussion, Ethiopia's case does not conform to the existing narrative on China-Africa relationship, which focused on China's resource interest in Africa. It is not for sake of natural resource exploitation that Chinese are investing their resource in Africa. Rather, they are creating a win-win strategic economic relationship that benefits both parties. China predominantly imports oil and hard commodities from a limited number of sub-Saharan African countries and exports manufactured, mostly final consumption goods. However, the Ethiopian case shows that China's interest in Africa is not limited to resources. The desire to establish export markets for China's light manufactured goods and transport and machinery goods and encourage Chinese construction companies dominates. It's difficult to undermine the fact that Ethiopia presents itself as a large market for manufacturing goods, machinery and capital equipment in infrastructure building. Intensification of China-Ethiopia relations has proven to be beneficial for Ethiopia and China as well. So Ethiopia has gained tremendously from China's zero tariff policy on agricultural commodities for the least developed countries, and sesame export to China now account for a large part of its foreign exchange earnings. Chinese built roads have helped in agrarian diversification and poverty alleviation. Imports of capital goods from China will enhance the competitiveness of Ethiopia's manufacturing firms. Chinese FDI has created employment opportunities contributing to technological sophistication and technological skill transfer. China has a huge positive impact on Ethiopian economy, and in many ways, China's engagement in Ethiopia can be regarded as a win-win situation. However, the extent to which long-term gains accrue to Ethiopia depends on the ability of the state to push forward its own development agenda. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tadala. Let's give him another round of applause, please. Thank you so much for a very thorough presentation on Ethio-China relations, mainly focusing on economic aspects, but also beyond economic issues. Obviously, China and Ethiopia will share more in terms of economic, political, and social issues. Chinese tremendous investment shows not only Chinese interest is not only economic interest, but also beyond economic interest. And Ethiopia is a strategic importance for China, and their relationship is based on win-win and mutual respect and understanding. And of course, some of the challenge that you highlighted is problems in Ethiopia and China relationship in regards to trade imbalances between import and export. So these are some of the highlights that I will take. But thank you again for a very thorough presentation. We'll come back again in the Q&A session. Our next speaker will be, they don't have a prepared sort of presentation, so it's going to be sort of like a panel. They will reflect their experiences in the Africa Union, since both two young ladies came from the Africa Union Youth Department, Youth for Peace program. Miss Sanizle and Atilka, they will reflect on youth's role, and also they try to link it maybe China's role. For instance, Africa has so much potential with sort of, energetic force, which is the youth. In sub-Saharan Africa alone, 3 out of 5 people unemployed are youth, and over 70% of the youth population in Africa lives under $2 per day. And while, again, 50% of the African population is female, and the African women, especially the African youth, face extreme challenges in accessing employment they have lower income, overcoming patriarchy and social prejudice. So I'll be happy if you could reflect on these issues and your works. So yeah, I will just allocate maybe about 7 minutes for both of you. The floor is yours.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on wherever you are, even to our online participants. As already mentioned, my name is Katleho, and I'm from the African Union Commission. I'm here with my colleague. So we'll touch a bit on the African Union and particularly the Youth for Peace program, as well as our other initiatives on youth development and empowerment, basically. So from the African Union Commission, and as you all might know, one of the key priorities of the African Union, or part of its key priorities and its aspirations and goals, is to ensure the peace and security in our continent, whether that is through regional integration or even just at national level. We try to ensure that there's peace and security that is maintained within the continent, right? So I think that's part of the reason why the Youth for Peace Africa program was developed, because of the understanding that youth integration and youth representation and involvement and their contribution in peace and development, peace and security issues is critical. The Youth Peace program was developed for that reason. So the youth program, it was established in 2018, for that reasons, for the reasons that I already mentioned. Understanding that youth voices are important, understanding that they need to be integrated in decision making, but also in policy making and in decision making with regards to peace and security. So as a result of this program, we have a continental framework that was developed and validated, launched. We actually have a number of youth ambassadors, African youth ambassadors from our different regions on the continent that have the specific mandate of advocating for peace and security and youth involvement and youth contributions in policymaking initiatives, right? So now, where does China come in? So the African Union, we don't work with African countries only. We accept help from all other countries. I mean, it goes without saying, we all know the work that China has done in different countries in the continent, in infrastructural development, financial contributions, agriculture. Our colleague here, Mr. Terrell, also mentioned and touched a lot on the trade and just the trade and just overall investment in Africa. So China has done a lot, and I hope they will continue to do a lot with regards to peace and security in the continent. So the Youth for Peace program, as I mentioned already, it has a continental framework was developed, which has certain priorities for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years. But I think by 2024, we hope that we'll have at least 25 countries with national action plans on peace and security. So that's one of the key goals. And we also want to build the capacity of youth in peace and security issues. We really want them to be involved in all the decision-making processes and all the policy-making and all the frameworks around peace and security issues in the African context. But let me just hand over to my colleague. She'll touch on a few of the other things that we do.
Thank you, Katleho, and good afternoon to all the delegates in the room as well as those online. My name is Sanzisile Madonsela. I too am from the African Union. I'm a policy officer within the Women, Gender and Youth Directorate. So I think just to build on what my colleague Katleho had said, and as well as the previous speakers and their presentations, firstly, I'm really encouraged that this conference, the focus is on youth leadership and how they can be used as the linkage for cooperation between Africa and China. The previous speaker, Mr. Tadele, he spoke about trade. And I think undeniably Africa's richest resource is definitely our youth. So if we're speaking about trade, we should talk about how do we add value to our youth? How do we make sure that wherever our youth is being traded or being exposed on the global arena, they come back home to the African continent better and more efficient and empowered. And so in that context, the African Union has developed a few initiatives and programs. I will speak on two flagships in particular that are housed within the youth division. So the first is the 1 Million Next Level initiative, which seeks to capacitate youth in Africa on five key areas, which are education, entrepreneurship, engagement, health and well-being, and the other one is not coming to me, but there are 4 E's and 1 H. And we also have an initiative which seeks to empower our women and youth, financially and economically, helping them to break those barriers. So I think in the context of a collaborative approach between China and Africa, we heard speakers earlier in the opening talk about exchange programs that really bring our world together, break the barriers, help with the exchange of ideas, knowledge sharing, and overall development. So that is something that would be really a great focus area within the collaboration prospects between Africa and China, bringing those two together. And really what we also want to do, if we're speaking to the Youth for Peace program that my colleague Katleho introduced, we also want to build and equip our youth force to be advocates for peace. We want to build them to be resilient in the face of conflict, in the face of peril. We want to make sure that we have a dominant youth force. And there's no better way than really to bring them together with their global peers and form a bigger, much more dominant, if I can call it, youth force continentally as well as globally. So I think in terms of the African Union's contribution and perspective to how collaboration can take place and should take place between Africa and China, we would really emphasize the use of our youth as key instruments, because we are, I say we because I am part of the youth force with my colleague here, Katleho. We are really learnable, we are really teachable, and eventually we will then be the teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again. Let's give them a round of applause, please, for Mrs. Katlaho and Ms. Sanlizle for reflecting the youth perspective, especially on peace and security aspect. And thank you again for flagging the issue of collaboration, in particular with youth to youth, with the African youth and the Chinese youth, mainly on entrepreneurship. And also thank you again for raising NAP, the National Action Plan. I know the UN has used peace and security resolution. It's, I think, resolution 1120. And I think we can also tap in on that. And thank you. So now I will pass the floor to our last speaker, but not least, Mr. Hang Yaping. I'm sorry again if I mispronounce. Yeah, I can't. I would not try that. Harry is easier. The floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tigis. Salam nolachu, aminachu. Dear guests and friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Huang Yupeng. You can call me Harry as well. I am from China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, referred to as CCECC. Since I came to Ethiopia in 2017, I have been working in the Etho-Egypt Railway for nearly 5 years. Based on my experience and story, I would like to share with you China-Africa cooperation from the perspective of Etho-Egypt Railway. First of all, please allow me to play a wonderful video to give you a quick glance of Etho-Egypt Railway. Etho-Egypt Railway is a 100% automated railway. It is built on 4 lines, 2 tracks, 1 station, 1 platform, 2 platforms, 2 trains, 1 engine, 1 locomotive, 1 train, 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 1 engine, Thank you. Could you please post my PowerPoint? Okay, well. As you know, as the first transnational standard gauge electrified railway in Africa, the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway has made many achievements with joint efforts among China, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. From 2018 to 2021, the transportation revenue increased steadily with an annual growth rate of 40%. By the end of September 2022, a total of 7 million tons of cargo have been transported by railway. Unlike land carriage by truck, railway takes only 16 hours to deliver the cargo from Djibouti to Ethiopia, when trucks 72 hours. Meanwhile, railway can operate 4 pairs of transits per day, which is equal to 212 trucks. In recent years, overnight and convenient commuter passenger trains have been operating. A large number of fertilizers, grains, and other necessities were transported in time by railway. In addition, we started the coal train service and vehicle transport by railway. What's more, in order to enhance the connection between the railway and industrial park, we established the first checklist railway station in Eastern Industrial Park to provide excellent service to our customers. All these service highlights continue to ignite the hope of the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway, making it a veritable way to prosperity. In order to better implement the Global Development Initiative, Belt and Road Initiative, China-Africa Cooperation Initiative, and Initiative of Peaceful Development in the Horn of Africa, proposed by China, making the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway better serve the regions along the line and drive the economic takeoff of Ethiopia. CCECC has been committed to improving and expanding the role of Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway. In recent years, CCECC has undertaken the construction of the Djibouti Multipurpose Terminal, the rail link to Djibouti Doha Lake Container Terminal, the Derridawa Dry Port, the Derridawa Industrial Park, the Awash Oil Depot connecting railway line, and the second phase expansion project of Mojo Dry Port, etc. At the same time, we have provided Ethiopia with a package of construction plans for railway development. Moreover, CCECC now is also processing a new freight transport company called EDR Transport Service PLC, fully relying on the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway, making up for the shortcomings by providing station-to-door service for the railway. Very soon, can our customers enjoy the high-quality transportation from port to door by railway. The success of the Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway has witnessed the joint efforts and deep friendship of the Chinese and African peoples. We successfully witnessed the training and certification of the first batch of 34 Ethiopian electric locomotive drivers in the history of Ethiopia, and the first batch of 13 Djiboutian electric locomotive drivers and 22 railway professional engineers in the history of Djibouti. Fortunately and very gratefully, I am usually invited to participate in the grand party from my beloved Ethiopian friends, and I also invite them to taste delicious Chinese mooncakes. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the African brothers and sisters who love me and help me. Thank you. I believe that this profound China-Africa friendship will be better inherited and developed in our younger generation. Dear friends, the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China concluded successfully last Saturday. General Secretary Xi Jinping proposed Chinese-style modernization, which provides a new path for developing countries in the world to realize modernization and achieve national prosperity and development. As a flag project of the cooperation between Ethiopia, Djibouti, and China, Ethio-Djibouti Railway is playing a significant role in boosting the development of Ethiopia, and it is a testimony to the friendship of Ethiopia and China. As the designer, builder, and operator, CCECC will closely work with Ethiopia to build it into a way of prosperity, safe, efficient, and vigorous. This is our duty and honor. We will fulfill our duty with devotion, diligence, and professionalism to honor the trust you put on us. Let's hand in hand to a bright, shared future. Thank you. Bada am signal.
Thank you, Mr. Hang. Let's give him another round of applause, please. Thank you so much for your excellent and very graphic presentation. It's wonderful. Well, I will not try to summarize, but as a way of concluding before I open the floor for Q&A, China and Ethiopia over the years have become, has become the biggest foreign investor and the largest trading partner in Ethiopia and also in Africa. And Ethiopia is one of the biggest markets of China in Africa. And of course, Chinese products, equipments, technologies, and so many investments and extra have been the markets of Ethiopia. And also, China has supported various construction of national projects, as you have mentioned, such as Express Tollway, the light tracks, the Ethio-Djibouti railway, and the AU building, and so many of them. Similarly, I think one of the other issues as we discuss Ethio-China or China-Africa prospects is there is closer political security ties in addition to the economic ties. China advocates independence, I think, of countries. It's very important, I think, also to reflect. China also appointed, especially for the Horn of Africa. I think it speaks much more. So with further ado, I think I would like to open the floor for questions and answers and or comments. So if you have specific questions to each speaker, you may address them with the speakers directly. So the floor is open. Questions, comments, reflections, suggestions. Always we need an icebreaker. Okay, over here, number 1.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentations. I'm Wang from Guangming Daily. I have 2 questions, one for Mr. Huang. Yeah. So as the designer, builder, and operator, so in the future, how to tap the potentials of EDR? Just your advice for both governments, China and also the Ethiopia government. My second question for Professor Tedley. So in your view, how to, exploit the potentials of the bilateral economic and trade, this kind of a cooperation in the future for, for both governments? Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have another questions? Yes, Dr. Jonas, please.
So let me also stand up following my brother's way of doing it. So thank you very much for that extremely interesting presentations, all the presenters, and the facilitator as well, of course. So I've got just 2 or 3 questions. The first question goes to my brother, Tadala. You were talking about the win-win trend between Ethiopia and China trade. I think it would have been even better if you indicated what the indicators, measures are, so as to say this is a win-win relationship, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be really far better for the analysis as well. So it is really, really interesting. And your second point, particularly, really, true friends don't hide facts behind. So you said when Chinese commodities keep on invading and flooding Ethiopian markets, they are dwarfing or discouraging local products. So there should be some alternative way to out. This is not really being enemy, but your critical approach is a very good one for our Chinese brothers as well as Ethiopian here brothers and sisters as well. So I think that's extremely interesting point. So I just want you to make sort of comment on that. And finally, to my brother Huang Yoping, that's excellent presentation that you made, as Dr. Tigges said, graphically accompanied. While constructing that railway from Djibouti to Addis, yes, it created absolutely excellent opportunities, potential for the youth. But how about the environmental aspect? Have you taken into account that green growth policy Ethiopia as well as China follows? So just these are the questions for you, and thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. Do we have another questions? Okay, now see, one slice is broken, so many hands over there, and then over there. Yeah.
I do have a question for the Mr. All right.
Your organizations. Yeah.
I'm Shimalis from Young Men's Association in Ethiopia, Christian Association in Ethiopia, from YNMC Ethiopia. So my question is for Ato Tadele and Huang. You have been presenting a lot of achievements. The achievement is that was done by the Ethio-China relationship. There are a lot of results, the positive results we got. So are these things came without any challenge? I haven't seen you to present the challenge and also to tell us how these challenges cope up. And for the two AU users, I do have a question. What's coming in your mind when you see the first session and how you are planning to use this opportunity in integrating the Ethio-China or Africa-China relationship for your empowering the users? I think my question is clear.
Good morning, everyone. This is Malaku Hailu from Model Africa Union Ethiopia. First of all, I would like to say thank for the organizers, both the IPSS and the Embassy of China Republic. So my question is, I think it's clear that the Chinese cooperation with the whole, with Africa in related to education and economics, that is fantastic and it will be great. But I see why it is very in less partnership or collaboration with in related to some thematic areas. For example, used to use and also cultural diplomacy. So these are the very less integration areas and also thematic areas that I see in from other continents, related to other continents. So why it is that, especially someone from the people who are presenting in online, they might be answered. So why it is this much less in related to cultural diplomacy and used to use in relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's pause here and then give a chance to our distinguished panelists to reflect, and then we'll come back if we have time for the second round of questions. Let me give the first chance to Mr. Hang to reflect, because most of the questions are for you. So if you could reflect on some of the questions and leave the rest for the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tigist. It seems that everybody is very interested in Ethio-Djibouti Railway. That's a good opportunity for us, because we are expected to expand our influence through all over the world. First, for Mr. Wang's question, how to increase or release the potentials of this railway. As you all know, this railway is only connecting Addis Ababa to Djibouti railway. This is how to say it? It's just a single line. When referred to Chinese railway network, it is really a network. You can get every cities connected. So, in our opinion, we suggested we just use this railway to connect the port in Djibouti, and also we build a connect from the railway to industrial park, to Doredao Dry Port, and all other facilities. And also, in order to increase or diversify our business, we have already made some achievements. For example, this year we successfully to transported vehicles by our railway. For the second one is, we do have a lot of challenges. The main challenge we face now is for the security of our railway. So now here I just want to set up a initiative or spoke out that we need to be together to protect the railway and love this railway. Why I say this? Because as you know, to be honest, to tell you frankly, every day the railway spare parts are stolen along the line by the villagers. This is really a headache for us. And as you know, because the shortage of forex crunch, it is very difficult to import these spare parts. So you can imagine, if all the spare parts are stolen from the railway, how this railway operate. So it is very difficult for us. Also, we do have many measures to avoid this situation. The first one, we suggest Ethiopia and Djibouti government to make their law to protect the railway. Especially, we need the strict implement of the law. And the second, from our company side, we also do some many things to show our social responsibilities. For example, we operate the convenient commuter trains. All the villages along our railway can take the commuter trains every Saturday. And the price is very, very diminished. Just 15 baht, 10 baht like this. So we just make our action to let more villages along the railway benefit from this railway. In this way, they can understand the importance of this railway and start to protect this railway. And the third one, we just try our best to cooperate with the federal police. They do really help us to fight against the crime. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank them. For the last but not least one I want to raise is that this railway is owned by Ethiopia and Djibouti. It's not Chinese railway. We just come here to assist our brothers and sisters to operate this railway well. So we do the skill transferring, knowledge transferring to to Ethiopians and Djiboutians. Now, almost around 90% of employees are local employees, and our capacity building work just make a really good achievement there. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hang. Yeah, maybe we'll come back if there are more comments and reflections. Now to Mr. Tadela, if you could reflect on some of the questions as well.
Okay, thank you for the comments, suggestions, and questions raised. Three issues raised. The first is how to exploit potentials between Africa and China. And the other category of issue that is raised is that of what are the indicators for Ethio-China relationship that has to be categorized under win-win situation. And the other is does the success between Ethiopia and China is without pain? That is the issue. But I wanted to raise some issues regarding why Africa is persistently poor. I think God creates this planet at a time, but now this planet has divided into three categories: developed, developing, and less developed. Why is that? Why these categories becoming? Before certain decades, like China, Chinese were, testing what Africans are exercising right now. But how they are becoming, free from that pain. The problem of Africa is the issue related to the issue of institutions. African governments are experienced creating the extractive institutions that creates conducive environment to conflict. Why conflict? Because Africa is not poor in its natural resource. But having natural resource cannot sufficient condition to be to have economic growth and ultimately to register economic development. So that as far as African government is trying to establish inclusive institutions, the issue of poverty, the conflict, the problem of peace and security will be persistent even in the next, unknown times. So what has to be done is that, African has to be committed to create inclusive institutions by eradicating these extractive institutions. Unless the issue of economic growth, the issue of economic development and prosperity is could not be realistic. So that how African youth will create with Chinese experiences, particularly African youth has to create a kind of people-to-people relationship in getting how the Chinese government has created inclusive institutions, particularly for the past 40 and 50 years. So there is a need to create people-to-people relationship, particularly for youth, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the continent would be for youth. So youth has to fight for extractive institutions, particularly corruption, bribery, and malfunctioning of institutions. So this has to be one exit strategy that Africans has to focus on. And this can create strong collaboration with the two, that means Africa and China. The other is that does Chinese, Chinese products are affecting domestic products. For obvious reason, if a country is importing a kind of commodity to its home, there is a trade-off. Every economic relationship, whether it has to be with China or the Westerns or even with our neighbor countries, there is a kind of trade-off. But what has to be done is what's the comparative advantage of that particular country seems to suggest in order to import or export its commodities towards or inwards to the country. So that importing a commodity from Europe versus importing a commodity from China has their own merits and demerits. What the country has to be done is that which cost or which comparative advantage is more beneficial for that importing country is an issue. For obvious reason, there were demerits when importing commodities from Chinese. As far as we decide to live separated from the world, the trade-off is inevitable. So how to reduce these trade-offs? Making the benefits better of both dimensions is an issue of discussion or an issue of the government decision that has to be undertaken. So for obvious reasons, there is trade-offs. I'm not trying to deny the problems. There are trade-offs in relation to balance of payment, because the volume of trade that China is undertaking versus the volume of trade Ethiopia is undertaking is significantly different. But we need to import commodities from abroad. We need to export our commodities to abroad. So that there is a need of exchange of goods and services towards and outside. So there is a trade-off that cannot be deniable, and that trade-off is inevitable. But minimizing that cost is the issue that the government has to focus on. And the last is what are the indicators for win-win relationship? One indicator of Ethio-Chinese relationship is that of, most importantly, China's aid and investment is not tied to a certain activities that the country is demanding. Because that tied investment and tied aid makes, the recipient country worse off. But Chinese didn't do this tied investment type or loan or grant type. So the country has an opportunity to give its development priorities. That is, the great indicator that Ethiopia is demanding more of the Chinese investment, the Chinese foreign direct investment, and also other different kind of economic relationships that is highly inclined to the Chinese government and the Chinese private investment. So that is most importantly that Africa is, willing to create a kind of relationship. So I think these are the main points categorized under these three sub topics. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tadele, for the reflections. Before I give the floor to our youth representatives from the African Union, I would like to give a chance to Ms. Wang, if she's still online, if she could reflect on some of the questions that was directed to her. No? She's off. Okay. Can you try to get her, if it's possible? If she could reflect, I would like to give her maybe a minute or two if she has some reflections. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon again. Thank you for the question on our reflections from the discussions of the day, and most importantly, what we plan to do with those reflections. So I think one of the emerging messages that have come out from the discussions is really that teamwork makes the dream work. and that partnership and collaboration are key to bringing together the Africa-China cooperation and making it a success. So in relation to how we within the youth division or our space that we come from can leverage from the discussion that we are having here, we already do have existing programs, as mentioned, we have existing frameworks. So I think ours would be to go back and put that cooperation lens on it and see how better and how closely we could work with China towards reaching mutual and beneficial outcomes based on our various comparative advantages. So an example would be our African Union Youth Volunteer Program, which actually we are both beneficiaries of. It would be great, for instance, to see African youth and even Chinese youth going to organizations and being housed and being basically capacitated and trained cross-continentally. So Chinese youth coming to Africa, African youth going that side. So that, I would say, is our main take home, that from whatever exists, our frameworks, our activities, our programs, we will put a lens and very intentionally so on how we could partner better towards a stronger Africa-China cooperation. Thank you. Sorry.
Also, I think it's important to note that how the African Union works, particularly with national or country acceleration strategies, we have different protocols, we have different frameworks, we have different decisions that are made even at heads of state level that different countries agree upon. Some ratify, some don't ratify. So our work also will depend on, and ratification has an impact on the relationship, and as a result has an impact on the implementation of certain work within the different thematic areas, right? So I think it's also important to note that there will be different countries that implement at a more accelerated rate than other countries, and that sort of thing. But I think Ethiopia is quite is ahead of a number of countries with the different protocols, the different, reporting frameworks and that sort of thing. So I think that's worth noting as well. But yes, you can.
Thank you. Did we get her? No? Yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't get Miss Wang. Maybe we could further the discussion outside this room. Well, unfortunately, always time is a problem. Time is always a challenge, and we couldn't go for a second round of questions. I would like to thank our excellent panelists for raising a number of issues. We have learned a lot. Obviously, I will not try to summarize. Once again, thank you so much, and let's give them a round of applause. And I'll give the floor to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to break off for lunch, and then lunch will be 1 hour. Let me just look at my time. We need to be back here by 5 minutes after 2 p.m. so that we can embark on the second session, which will be chaired by our very own His Excellency, Dr. Jonas Adeto. So as soon as we come back, Dr. Adeto, just get into it, dive into it, so that we don't waste further time. So yes, lunch is ready, is served, and bon appetit.